They called her many things: the widow of the wind, the bride of the mornings that never came. Some claimed she was simply unlucky. Others, more quietly, whispered she had been chosen by something that had no name. But what is known, what cannot be denied, is this: every man who ever stood beside her at the altar died before sunrise. Their bodies were found in silence. No wounds, no signs of struggle. Their eyes were always wide open, like they saw something they could never forget. And yet she lived, untouched, unchanged, unclaimed. She would walk through the village barefoot at dawn, her wedding dress still clinging to her like the last breath of night. And no one dared speak to her. No one asked where she went when the moon was high. No one followed when she disappeared into the edge of the forest, always alone, always just before midnight. Time passed. Seasons turned. The grass refused to grow on the soil beneath her feet. The birds stopped singing when she passed. Children were told not to say her name out loud. And still, she married again. And again. And again. And each time, without fail, death came before the sun. Until one day, a stranger came to the village. A man with no family name. No history. No fear in his eyes. He looked into hers and did not blink. He listened to the stories and did not flinch. He watched her walk through fog and shadow, and followed without hesitation. He said he would marry her. And he did. And as the sun fell behind the hills and the sky turned red, the village held its breath, because no man had ever survived the night in her arms. But by morning, he still breathed. And behind that breath was a truth no one was ready to hear. A truth buried beneath the ground they had feared to touch. A truth that did not begin with her, and would not end with him. To understand why every man who loved her never saw the sun again, you must return to the night Marian was born. It was the kind of night the old ones still speak of, where the sky grumbled like an old man's warning, and the wind carried whispers no one could name. Thunder rumbled for hours, but no rain fell. No clouds above, yet lightning split the trees. When Grace went into labor, the midwives almost refused to help. Her womb had not moved all day, and yet the ground trembled as she screamed. When the child came, she did not cry. She looked at them, opened her eyes, and mouthed something they could not understand. Then, she said her first word. Cold. That was before her first cry ever touched the air. The women dropped their calabashes. One fainted. Another ran out into the dark. And Grace, she wrapped her baby girl in cloth, held her close and whispered, "You were not meant for this world, but you are mine." From that moment, strange things began to stir. The goats refused to enter their pen. The shadows near the well grew longer than they should. The old baobab tree, the one said to carry the spirits of the ancestors, dropped all its leaves overnight. They named her Marian, though no one knows where Grace found that name. Some say she heard it whispered by the wind before the baby was born. For years, Marian grew in silence. She did not laugh. She did not play. But wherever she went, a small red bird followed her, even through storms. It never left her side. Never made a sound. And there was a mirror, carved into the wall of their hut. Grace would place Marian in front of it, hoping to brush her hair. But the mirror never showed the child's reflection. Only the room behind her, and something else, watching. When she turned 7, Marian began speaking to trees. Not playfully, not in a child's game. She would kneel, press her forehead to the bark and listen, for hours. Then one day a stranger came. Dressed in a black robe stitched with silver thread. He arrived with no footsteps, no dust behind him. No one saw him enter the village. No dogs barked. No birds stirred. He walked straight to Grace's door and asked to speak with Marian. Grace, trembling, told him to leave. But Marian, she stepped out herself. She stared into his eyes, and for the first time in her life, her lips curled into something that almost resembled a smile. He spoke softly, in a language no one understood. He reached into his cloak and offered her a ring carved from obsidian stone. Then he bowed, and said only this: "Marian of the thunderborn breath, you are promised. Come with me and you will never feel cold again." She looked at the ring, looked at her mother, looked into the sky. Then she said, "I choose to stay where my blood still sings." The stranger's smile fell away. His hands folded, slowly. His voice lost its silk and turned to iron. "Then I shall wait. And every man who tries to claim what you denied me, shall feel my hand before the dawn." He turned. And as he walked away, the ground behind him blackened, each footprint a scar. He walked into the forest and was never seen again. But the red bird that followed Marian? It disappeared that very night. And the next morning, the tree nearest their compound began to bleed. Not sap. Blood. Thick. Slow. Real. The villagers said nothing. But they began to watch Marion from behind their windows. And Marion, she began to change. Her skin glowed more in the moonlight than in the sun. Her voice took on a rhythm, like a song only the river remembered. And though Grace warned her to never accept love from any man, to never look too long into their eyes, Marion began to attract suitors. Not by trying. Not by choice. They came from far villages. Drawn by a whisper. Drawn by something in the wind. They said they dreamt of a woman in white. Said she called to them. Said she stood beneath a tree that bled. And each one came. And each one asked for her hand. And one by one, they never saw the sunrise again. The first man to ask for Marion's hand was Thomas. A hunter. The kind of man the forest feared. His arms were thick from years of wrestling antelope and dragging fresh kills across the plains. His aim was so steady he once struck a hawk mid-flight, with his back turned. When Thomas declared his love for Marion, the village paused. Some nodded. Others whispered. But Thomas was not the kind of man people warned. He stood in the chief's courtyard, declared his intention, and brought Marion a necklace made from the teeth of a lion. Grace begged him to leave her be. But he only laughed, saying, "If there's a curse, let it try me. I fear no man, no spirit." The wedding was rushed, small but joyful. Marion did not smile, nor did she cry. She simply stood beside him, silent, her eyes never once meeting the sun. That night, the fire in their hut would not light. Thomas struck flint after flint, but no spark held. He joked at first, called the hut cursed. But as the hour grew deeper, he grew quieter. Outside, the wind began to speak. Not howl. Not roar. Speak. In tongues that made the air tighten. And just before dawn, Marion walked out of the hut alone. Her white wrapper was untouched. Her steps were unhurried. Inside, Thomas lay as though sleeping. His eyes open, mouth parted, a single drop of blood beneath his nose. The village fell into silence. The elders gathered but refused to enter the hut. One whispered, "She has married death itself." Grace buried him at the edge of the village, beneath the only tree that never bore fruit. Marion said nothing. 3 moons passed. Then came Jonas. He was everything Thomas wasn't, light-hearted, loud, full of song. A palm wine tapper said he feared no ghost because he had seen one and offered it a drink. He made Marion laugh, a soft, broken sound that startled the birds in the trees. The village warned him. Grace wept. But Jonas claimed that love was stronger than superstition. "If I die," he joked, "at least I'll die having kissed a legend." On the night of their wedding, Jonas danced so hard the earth shook. He sang to Marion beneath the moonlight, and for a moment she almost smiled again. That night, his hut glowed from the fire he lit. But just before dawn, the flames died on their own. No wind, no ash. Just gone. When they found Jonas, he was sitting upright, still dressed in his wedding clothes. His face was locked in a wide grin, lips stretched painfully, teeth exposed. Eyes rolled to the sky. The smile, frozen. They say his body stayed warm for hours. But his soul had fled long before. A hush fell upon the village that lasted weeks. People crossed the path when Marion passed. Pregnant women tied charms around their bellies. Dogs growled at her door and ran howling into the forest. Then a third suitor arrived. Peter. A merchant from beyond the 7 hills. He had heard of Marion. Heard the legends. But he believed in no gods, no spirits, no fate. Only desire. And Marion to him was a prize worth claiming. He paid the bride price in gold, not goats. Refused the village rituals. And whispered to Marion on the wedding night, "We leave before the moon falls. We'll escape this madness." But escape is for those who are not already marked. Peter packed their things in silence while Marion stood near the fire, staring into it as if she could see something crawling inside the flames. He took her hand. She followed. They made it to the edge of the river before the air changed. Before the fog thickened. Before the sound of footsteps echoed on water. Marion fell to her knees, screaming a name no one else could hear. Peter's grip loosened. His feet left no prints behind as he walked forward, into nothing. By morning, his body was found at the riverbank. No wounds, no signs of struggle, no footprints in the sand. Just his body, and a single black feather clutched in his hand. That day the village made a decision. Marion was forbidden to marry again. The chief himself declared it. The elders circled her compound with salt and ash. No man was to speak to her after sunset. No gifts are to be delivered, no eyes to be met. And so, Marian became something else. She was no longer the girl with the red bird. No longer Grace's daughter. She was the widow bride. Children sang her name in cautionary songs. Women burned their wedding clothes if her shadow passed over them. And Marian, she said nothing. But her eyes began to glow. Not brightly, faintly. Only on the nights when the moon refused to rise. Only when the wind smelled like iron. Only when the trees creaked without swaying. Grace locked herself indoors every full moon. She no longer spoke Marian's name aloud. And every time Marian walked near the old cursed tree, it wept. Its sap ran thick, sticky, red. The elders told the children it was tree disease. But the children, they heard more. On stormy nights, when lightning danced but no thunder followed. When rain fell but didn't soak the earth. When the village slept but the wind stayed awake. They heard it. Voices. Faint. Broken. Familiar. Help me. Marian? I wasn't ready. You promised? The voices were not distant. They came from the forest. From the ground. From the tree. The villagers began to speak less. Laugh less. Marry less. They feared their joy might call her name. And so they waited. For the next man. For the next fool. For the next sunrise, that would never come. They feared their joy might call her name, and so they waited for the next sunrise that would never come. But sometimes the wind changes direction when no one is watching. And change came walking into the village with no sound at all. He arrived with no caravan, no horse, no footprints, just a wooden staff carved with bones, and a small leather pouch tied to his waist, its contents rattling with each step. His eyes were not kind nor cruel, just quiet. They called him Daniel. He spoke only when necessary, ate little, slept with one eye open. When the children approached him, he gave them black stones polished smooth as water. When the dogs barked at him, he looked at them once, and they never barked again. He came to the village at sunset. By morning, he had already asked for Marian's hand. The elders gathered, old men who had watched 3 burials and said nothing. They told him the story. Every word, every scream. They showed him the tree. The red sap still leaking from the bark. They begged him to turn back. But Daniel simply said, I did not come here to be safe. He did not offer goats or gold. He offered only a name. His own. Let her carry it, he said. So when she walks through the fire again, she does not walk alone. Grace stood behind the doorway as he spoke. Her face had grown thin with the years, her hands trembling from the weight of too many funerals. But when Daniel looked at her, she bowed her head and said only, She will not stop you. But neither will she save you. The wedding was silent. No drums. No songs. Marian wore no veil. Only white, the same cloth from her first wedding, still untouched by time. When she looked at Daniel, her face held no expression. But when he placed a charm at her feet, a small bone wrapped in dried grass, she flinched. No one had ever done that before. Daniel said nothing. But he reached into his pouch and placed 1 charm at the door of the hut. Then 1 at the back window. Then 2 more, 1 in each corner of the room. Marian watched. Her hands did not shake. But her eyes began to water. Not from sadness, but from memory. That night, the sky held no stars. The moon disappeared behind a wall of clouds. The air grew heavy, thick like steam but cold like the inside of a grave. And just after midnight, the wind died. Then came the silence. The kind that feels like a breath held too long. The kind that makes the skin crawl. The kind that says something is watching. Inside the hut, the fire flickered once, then extinguished. The charms began to rattle, though no hand touched them. Marian's knees buckled. She collapsed beside the hearth, whispering, He's here? Daniel stepped forward. And that's when it spoke. A voice without a mouth. A presence without form. It filled the hut from the roof to the floor. The shadows stretched and twisted. The door shook. The window cracked. The charms turned to ash. And from the center of the room, he emerged. The shadow groom. No face. No feet. Just the outline of a man stitched together with smoke and grief. The room froze. Marian's breath caught in her throat. Grace, far away in her hut, dropped to her knees without knowing why. And the voice came again. She was mine before the sun touched her. You do not take what was promised to me. She bears my mark. And all who love her shall rot beneath the stars. Daniel stepped forward. His voice was calm. He did not raise his hands. Did not curse. Did not chant. He said only, Then take me. But let her go. Forever. Silence. The spirit did not move. Marian's eyes widened in horror. Daniel repeated it, louder this time. Take me. But let her go. She belongs to no one. Not even you. The shadow groom shifted. His form grew taller, stretched to the ceiling. The hut began to shake. The fire reignited, burning blue. The charms reformed, one by one. Then the spirit laughed. Not a laugh of joy. A sound that shattered the pot near the hearth. A sound that turned the bones inside the charm bag to dust. Then came the roar. Not from the spirit. From the sky. Thunder cracked across the heavens. The ground beneath the hut opened slightly, just enough to hiss. And at that moment the walls of the hut collapsed inward. The roof split in half. The windows shattered. And all went dark. There was no sound. No light. No breath. Just the scent of smoke. And the memory of something ancient leaving the room. When the villagers arrived, they expected a body. Or two. But they found only silence. The fire pit was still warm. Marian lay unconscious on the floor. And Daniel was kneeling. Eyes open. Chest rising. Alive. But different. Changed. Touched by something no man was meant to face. And from that moment, the curse was no longer hers alone. Morning came slower than usual. The sun hesitated behind the hills, as if unsure whether it had the right to rise. The roosters did not crow. The dew that covered the grass shimmered red, not silver. And as the first golden beam pierced through the clouds, the village gathered at the ruins of the hut. No one spoke. No one dared cross the final few steps. They had seen enough death and silence to know when something sacred had been disturbed or restored. The air around the compound had changed. Where once it was heavy, now it was light. Where once it smelled of dust and old spirits, now there was a sweetness. Marian stepped forward first, slowly. Her white cloth, still white, drifted with the breeze. Her hair, unbraided, glowed like a flame under the sun. But her face was no longer still. She smiled. A real smile. Not wide, not forced, but deep. Like a woman who had seen the bottom of the river and come back with her breath still intact. Behind her, Daniel followed. He leaned on his staff, his legs weak, his skin pale. But he was alive. And the villagers wept. Not in fear, not in shock, but in awe. For they knew what they were seeing was no longer a woman and a man. They were witnesses of the impossible. A curse had been broken. And not by ritual, not by blood, but by a man who asked nothing in return. The elders fell to their knees. The chief poured libation without a word. Grace stood at the back, her hands pressed to her chest, her tears soaking the earth. And for the first time in years, she whispered her daughter's name aloud. Marian. The cursed tree stopped bleeding. Its bark darkened. Its leaves returned. The air cleared. The wind, the one that once carried whispers, was still. But peace, my child, does not come without its own shadow. Daniel did not leave the encounter untouched. Though his body healed, his eyes never stopped seeing. They would glaze over without warning. And he would stare into corners no one else noticed. He would rise in the middle of the night, open the door, and nod to someone no one else could see. He never feared them, never spoke of them. But he would say, "They're watching. They remember. But they won't harm us now." And Marian, she was no longer the cursed bride. No longer the woman the village feared. She became something more. A healer. Her touch calmed children who had nightmares. Her voice stilled the dying. Her songs, the ones she once whispered to trees, were now sung at births and funerals. She did not speak often. But when she did, even the birds stopped to listen. And once a year, every year, on the night of her wedding, Marian and Daniel walked hand in hand to the edge of the forest. They carried no drums, no horns, no chants, just a single white flower. One for Thomas, the first who dared. One for Jonas, who laughed his way to the grave. One for Peter, who tried to flee but couldn't outrun fate. They would place it at the foot of the old tree, the same tree that once wept blood. And they would kneel. And Daniel would whisper their names, one by one, not with guilt, but with honor. And the wind, once feared, would carry those names gently across the fields, so that no one would forget, so that no one would rewrite the story. And though the village healed, the memory of what had happened never left. They no longer sang warning songs, but they told the tale. At every full moon, around every fire, from old lips to young ears. That once a girl was born without a cry. That once a man loved her without asking for anything in return. That once, a shadow came to collect what was denied, and it was met, not with fear, but with love. A kind of love no spirit knew how to destroy. A kind of love that walks through fire and walks back out again. And the story always ends the same, with Marian's voice soft and clear saying, "I'm no longer yours. I never was." And the fire crackles quietly as the storyteller leans forward and says, "Love can kill, but it can also heal. Some souls must walk through death to break what fear cannot. And not all monsters wear claws. Some wait at the altar. But even the oldest curses bow to the kind of love that asks for nothing but the right to stay." And so, after all was said and done, Marian and Daniel found themselves standing not just in the light of the morning sun, but in the light of truth, something far brighter than any curse could ever be. Marian, once known as the widow bride, walked a different path now. Her steps were firm, her heart steady. She looked at the forest with no fear, no regret, just a quiet understanding of the journey she had walked, from a life marked by darkness to a life now brimming with peace. Daniel, his vision no longer clouded by the spirits, stood beside her. His eyes no longer trembled when he saw the shadows, for he had learned that light, no matter how small, always drives away the darkness. Together they gave their thanks to the spirits that had come, and to those that had gone. For they knew now that the line between the living and the dead is a thin one, but it is love that can heal it. Every year, as the seasons changed and the leaves fell from the trees, Marian and Daniel would make their way to the forest. There they would place a white flower at the base of the tree that had once bled. But this time, the tree did not weep. The spirits had no reason to mourn, for their journey had been completed. And the village, once filled with fear and whispers, now flourished in peace. They no longer spoke of curses but of love. Every heart once burdened was free. Marian and Daniel lived their days in quiet, humble joy. And the villagers who once feared her name now honored it. They passed the story down to their children, a tale not of curses or shadows, but of a woman who walked through darkness and came back, unbroken. And so the legend of Marian, the woman who loved beyond the veil, was passed on for generations. And each time it was told, the story grew not darker but brighter, a reminder that love, no matter the cost, is the force that changes everything. Some curses must be broken by those who dare to face the darkness. And not all monsters wear claws. Some wait at the altar. But those who love without fear, walk into the light and leave the past behind. Now tell me, my friends, would you too marry someone cursed by a spirit if it meant that your love could free them? Tell me in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, if you believe love has the power to change even the darkest fates, then subscribe to Timeless Epic Folktales, where the legends never fade and the ancestors still speak. Until next time, remember, the greatest stories are always the ones that live within us, passed down by those who dared to dream of love and freedom.